Welcome to the Body and Beyond podcast with Alice and Gina,
a podcast sparking discussion on all things health, mindset, fitness, goals, and motivation.
We strive to help you to boost your confidence, to take the lead in your own life, to back yourself, and to step into your full potential. Body and Beyond is proudly sponsored by The Seed Cycle. The Seed Cycle is a beautiful female-founded Australian company. Seed cycling is a natural methodology that you can use to support your menstruation and your ovulation, and it can even be used to support your hormones through perimenopause and menopause. If you'd like 50% off your first month subscription, use the code BODYANDBEYOND at the Seed Cycle website www.theseedcycle.com.au. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Body and Beyond podcast with Alice and Gina. Hope you're all doing really well today. Today's episode, we're going to be covering the Christmas and holiday period.
And basically just chatting about all things staying on track, whatever that might look like for different people during this festive season. And I think it's quite a common time to have people feeling a little anxious, especially if they've been working on their health and fitness goals this whole year, or maybe they've just started, the second half of this year. I know I've got a few clients who have joined even in like September, and they've made a really good start on their health and fitness goals. And they're feeling a little anxious about what to do coming into the time of year when there are so many social events, food, there's alcohol, time off work, holidays, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So I wanted to first of all start the podcast off by asking, first of all, saying that a lot of the things we're going to be talking through today, they're not, it's not general necessarily. Everyone needs to take their own individual circumstance into play. So you need to think about what are your goals at this point in time, and some of the recommendations or topics may be specific to one group of people, maybe not so someone else. So the first thing to reflect on is, what is your goal over the Christmas and holiday period? Are you working with a coach through a fat loss phase? Are you working with Alice through a fat loss phase? Or potentially, are you just in a maintenance phase for yourself? So you're just looking at maintaining your current body composition. Or some of us, we're actually working towards muscle gains. We're trying to change our body composition, perhaps maintain a similar amount of body fat, but still, put on some more muscle. So it's going to look slightly different for each person. So none of the recommendations or things we're discussing today are necessarily for everyone, but you might be able to pick up some tips and tools and strategies that may be helpful.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I think that goes for so much of what we chat about in the fitness industry. And so much of it really comes down to individual goals and where you're at on your journey, really, because all the advice that I personally give to some of my clients is very different to the advice that I give to others on my team, really depending on where they are on their journey and what their goal is personally. So with that, hopefully we can give some tips to think about how you can have a good and non-stressful period, I guess, through Christmas, while still kind of being mindful of your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe touching on, what you mentioned to me off the air earlier, Alice, and just around some of the general messaging or posts that people put up on platforms like Facebook or Instagram, where they're giving general advice to people. Did you want to go over that again?
Yeah, and I think that is it's so relevant to so much of what we're even going to be talking on going forward in the podcast. But I just feel like you've got to really understand that. And even when I post things on Instagram myself, I always think to myself, like, there's always going to be a certain person or a certain group of people that you're thinking about when you're targeting a certain message, but it doesn't mean that that message is for you necessarily. So, for example, if we're going to talk about how to implement strategies to staying on track with your health and fitness goals during festive season, is going to look different for someone who is, for example, you and I, who have been in the industry for a very long time. I would say we're both at a really good maintenance place. Like, you and I are both really just maintaining a good balance. Obviously, we both still kind of strive for muscle growth as you do, but more or less we're at a real good balance and maintenance phase. So that's going to look really different for someone who is in the depth of really trying to improve body composition and decrease body fat, especially when it comes to health conditions and that sort of thing as well. So,
and we've also done the work. You've obviously done many weight gain and weight loss phases through competing. I've also done some muscle gain and some fat loss phases. But yeah, so we've kind of done that groundwork, and we have a really good understanding of basic, nutrition and what works for our body as well. So that's the thing. Some of your clients or some of the listeners, they may not necessarily know their bodies yet and what really works for them, what doesn't work for them. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah. And I think it goes on with that point as well. That there is a bit of groundwork you have to do before you get to that maintenance place. But the main thing is to remember that everyone can get there at some point. It just takes that work and that effort to get there, and get to a place where you can build that balance and, I guess, maintenance, I would say.
Absolutely. So where did you want to start? Did you want to start with those in more of a maintenance / muscle building phase, or did you want to start more with that kind of more of a fat loss / health focus?
Yeah, I think we'll start there, only because I have a lot of, obviously personally, I have a lot of my own clients at the moment who are in the middle of fat loss or weight loss phases right now. And they've done a really good job. They've made incredible progress over the last couple of months, and they're kind of getting to now and thinking or feeling a little anxious around what's to come with all the events coming up. So I think one of the biggest points that I wanted to start with is the whole idea that we get around festive season and just being this full month of, going off plan or going off track. Like, why do people see it as this, like, oh my gosh, it's December, all of my goals and my fitness and my health is out the door. Like, I have no control over events and drinking alcohol and that sort of thing. And I think it's really important to remember that that's really not the case. We have this idea around this festive season being like 1 or 2 months of the year, when the reality is, like, how many events do you really have in December where you are spending time with family? Obviously on Christmas Day, I'm sure that's most people, having a big Christmas lunch, having Christmas parties with work. It really isn't 30 days of the month, is it? It's only a couple.
People almost think it's a bigger deal than it really is. Like, they think there's 20 days of the 30 that are, it's all going to go out the window.
Yeah, exactly. And you made a really good point earlier about, and I think this is maybe where we can start, and that is actually looking ahead at your calendar and planning ahead, and kind of establishing that that little bit of control and routine in the month ahead, even though things are going to be a little bit out of routine, So did you want to touch on that, basically, on that
Absolutely.
idea?
Yeah. So I think what you mentioned before around that the way that people think about the festive season being that 1 or 2 months and it being overwhelming and everything's going to go off the rails, etc. So that's a very vague global way of thinking. It's that kind of that way of thinking that makes you feel overwhelmed or anxious. Okay, so what could be a really good tool is to actually look at your month ahead. So if you've got a whole calendar, a whole month to view calendar, and actually put down all of your social engagements that you do have, so it's right there in front of you and you can see what's ahead of you. And you might notice that it's not actually as big a deal as you thought. It's not, you don't have as many social engagements as you're thinking that. So you really, there's a less likely chance you're going to go off track. And again, this is probably more for a fat loss kind of client. It's probably not going to be as bad as it feels. Okay. So then looking at all of those social commitments, identify of those, so say there's 5 or 6 across the month, identify which ones are really important to me. Which ones, I'm with my best friend, it's their birthday, or it's Christmas Day and I'm with my family. So identify which ones are the more important ones, and then look at them as the ones where you are going to have delicious cocktails. You are going to eat the food you want. You're going to have the beautiful food that your mum's cooking or grandma's cooking or whatever. And then identify which are the days where it's literally social drinks with friends down the pub, and there's going to be pub food or whatever that looks like for you. Or maybe it's drinks with friends and there's a big grazing board. You know that grazing board is going to be there. So those things may be less significant to you, and those things will be a fantastic opportunity to make sure you have your balanced pre-planned, nutrition prior to attending that event. So when you get to that event, you might just have waters, or you might have, gin and, low calorie tonic or vodka sodas, whatever, if you're still going to engage in drinking. So you've got a bit more of a plan. You don't feel like you're completely out of control. You're satiated. You've had your meal, that you've thought ahead. You've got protein, carbohydrates, and fats in that meal. It might be a slightly bigger meal as well. So then you'll last the distance 4 or 5 hours for that social engagement. And again, that's probably one that's less important to you. There wasn't really high quality food or delicious, amazing food on offer. So it doesn't matter that you missed out. So looking at those events that aren't really such a big deal, and just kind of living life as normal, maybe with a couple of extra drinks. And then the ones that are really important to you, make the most of them, enjoy them.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. Especially because, it actually, when you get to that time of year, when you've got a lot of things coming up and there's a lot of alcohol and a lot of drinking, one thing that I always tend to hear from clients is, I don't feel good. I feel awful. All of this food, all of this alcohol, I just feel like, and it's kind of that idea of like, well, if you actually do pick the ones that you really do want to maybe indulge a little more in, but then also have a plan to pick the ones where you're going to set yourself some goals and a little bit of boundary in how you're going to make that less of a all or nothing, I guess. So I really like that idea. And that's also something I implement with my current clients as well, because generally they do have meals off every week. It's not like a strict diet plan, but I always do encourage them to basically, if you've got 2 events on or 3 events on, or you're catching up with friends 3 times this week, is a busy week, note it in your diary and do exactly what you've just said. Basically say, okay, Saturday night, I know there's going to be alcohol. We're going to a burger joint. It's probably going to be something like burgers and chips. Then plan your other day to go into the restaurant and say, okay, I'm going to pick something like healthy off the menu this time. I'm going to get a salad, or I'm going to get high protein dish. So you're really making a bit of a compromise.
Nice steak and veggies.
Yeah. You're really making a little bit of a compromise and planning in advance. And those small things actually make such a huge difference, don't they?
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, the way someone feels. So if you have like 2 or 3 days where you're eating outside of your normal intake, whether someone's dieting or not, if you start eating things that are a bit random and outside your norm, you're going to feel potentially a little bit bloated, or a little bit a bit sugary, like you've just kind of overdone it a little bit, So, but that's more of an internal feeling that's different for everyone. But you normally know when you've had too many days of drinking, for example, or too many days of eating whatever leftover Christmas food for 3 days after, whatever that looks like, so if you can have a plan in place, like you mentioned.
Exactly. And I think that comes back to the tips that I had also thought about when it comes to the time around your social gatherings. So there's going to be plenty of days in the next month and a bit ahead where you've got nothing on, where you are literally just doing your same old routine. So really put your energy towards getting good nutrition in, having a plan in place and following through with that, getting your hydration up, and also making exercise your priority, right? So still making sure that you are hitting your training sessions, especially on the days where you have that control.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes for as well, the week prior to and after Christmas, the week prior to and after New Year's, those days you can still put in decent effort, even if it's 80% or 90%, or even if it's a day where you're really tired and you're just showing up, those days absolutely count. To still being on track with those days.
Yeah. And I think another really good point is swinging back to someone who doesn't have a fat loss goal necessarily, someone who's more at a maintenance, or they're really looking to gain muscle, this is a really prime time to utilize training sessions and train hard when you know you're going to be in more of a calorie surplus on some days. You want to be putting that into good use, you know, because it will come in handy for good lifting sessions. So you don't want to miss that opportunity. Get some PB.
So if you're planning a week, absolutely. If you're planning a week, you know, you can do your PB lifts, you know, the day of Christmas morning or Christmas afternoon or Boxing Day, you know, the day after.
Yeah.
Also looking, you know, scheduling your big leg sessions or your big back days, the days when you really need that extra oomph, you know, either doing that the day before Christmas and then backloading with a you know, higher surplus of calories on Christmas, or the day of or the day after. So you can really maximize all the extra calories and really recover your muscles really well.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, why don't we go through a couple of tips for people that they can actually just utilize during social gatherings, like the typical social gathering where there's going to be a lot of food, a lot of alcohol. What are some of the things that you feel that they can put in place, like during those events?
So a really big one would be if you know there's going to be kind of a spread or a buffet style, big, you know, lots of food on offer. Things like making sure that you take a nice serving of protein, so a decent serving of protein. So maybe you've got your ham, your turkey, whatever else is on offer, fresh seafood. Make sure you've got a decent serving of that protein, and then going and grabbing all your fresh veggies and salads and whatnot and filling up your plate with those. So you can actually have a beautiful first course of all of that. You're going to feel quite satiated after that. Then if you want to go back and get more and maybe try lots of the different more carby kind of greasy kind of options, you can try a little bit of all of those, but you're not going to be as ravenous had you have just gone for a bit of everything on that first plate.
I agree. Yeah. And also we know the bigger difference it makes to have those high volume meals. So actually getting the veggies and the salads on your plate and like eating and filling up on good foods first before you kind of go on to the more enjoying the indulgent food and the desserts.
Yeah, totally. Also knowing, you go.
No, I was just going to say, this is a big one for me because normally every year we have a Christmas party, and my dad's side of the family is huge, like so many people. And it is basically just everyone in the family brings their plate, which means there is like 50 plates of different sorts of food. And every year it's like, oh, I just want to go for that dessert first off. But you really have to kind of consciously make a decision just to kind of get that first plate of good food in you first, and then do what you can fit after you get that in. It makes a difference.
Totally. Yeah. And it's tricky because like I'm definitely the type of person that loves variety. I love trying things.
Yeah.
So for me, that would be, definitely
I love
having 50 delicious things to try. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great tip. And also,
what's another tip you have? Yeah.
I think just when it comes to portion control, I think it's a really good time to actually just be mindful and practice a little bit of that. Because often if you're following meal plans or, you know, you're on kind of a journey where you are weighing your food out, it's a great opportunity to kind of do intuitive eating, but to practice really listening to your body and not eating past the point where you actually feel sick, which happens a lot on Christmas. I always hear people talk about, you know, how they feel awful after a big feed and they just want to go to bed, or and it's like, well,
food coma.
Food coma.
Like eating so much that your body has to shut down to process it all.
Yeah, exactly. So just being mindful of portion sizes and increasing your water intake as well. Make sure you get your hydration up, especially if you're drinking alcohol. And I think that brings me to the alcohol point, and that is trying to find a few lower calorie, lower sugar options if you can with alcohol. If there's so many drinks on offer, you know, and you're going to a Christmas party or something, it really does make a big difference if you're going to have quite a few drinks. If you were to swap those for like a low calorie tonic or soda water or a Diet Coke with something, or even just like a glass of wine, as opposed to a very high calorie, high sugar cocktail. If you were going to have like 5 cocktails, for example, the difference between that and something that is lower calorie is massive.
It's huge.
Yeah. So they are tips and tricks that really do make a difference when it comes to alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, you know, certain drinks like Bailey's, for example, it's freaking delicious. But if you were to have a few of those on ice or mixed into cocktails, like you mentioned, the calorie difference is going to be huge. The sugar, also the way you feel later that day or the way you feel the next day is going to be slightly different.
Yes.
Yeah. Compared to having vodka sodas or,
Oh gosh, yeah, of course. So yeah, I think there's some great tips for actually dealing with events. You brought up a point a little earlier when we were chatting as well that I would love to hear more about from you, and that is social pressure, and just the feeling around like being able to say no if you are in one of those situations where you do feel pressure to kind of do certain things. How do you feel like people could cope better with that?
So first of all, really reflecting on the past, and have you felt social pressure in the past when it comes to eating and drinking or being at Christmas Day with family? You know, I think the classic one is for a lot of people feeling pressure from grandma to eat her favorite dish or whatever that is. You know, I think a lot of people can relate to that. But really reflecting on the past and noticing what's in my control. So what's in my control? Is this social pressure? Is this something I'm taking on from other people? Or is actually in my control to not take on that social pressure? Or am I making up that social pressure in my mind? Or is grandma actually forcing it down my throat? You know, so just reflecting on those different things and noticing, is someone really giving you pressure? Or is this something that I feel obliged to partake in because it seems socially or culturally appropriate? You know, so reflecting on that, and then kind of, you know, thinking about, so say this is happening the day before Christmas, is thinking about Christmas Day and looking at, you know, your understanding of the past and then bringing that new reflection around what is in my control to the next day. So you're basically prepared mentally for how you're going to handle it. And that sounds probably a little bit serious for some people, but for those who more so are focusing on a fat loss phase, that's probably more relevant for them around how they're going to handle that pressure that either is there or the pressure they're putting on themselves to feel like they're fitting in, because that can be a big thing for people as well, is wanting to feel like they belong or fitting in. And so that pressure is actually from themselves. On the flip side of that, it's also reflecting on what is important to you and noticing if Christmas Day, or if that, you know, the Sunday afternoon drinks with friends, if that is truly important to you, then go have fun, like own it. Don't feel like you have to beat yourself up or feel guilt or regret around your decision. If something is true, like I love having drinks with my friends in the sunshine. It's something I freaking love doing, you know? So there's no need to feel regret if that's something that truly lights you up, right? As I said earlier, look at your calendar of the month ahead and identify what lights you up, what is so important to you. Exactly. And then go into that day, like just have so much fun and really enjoy it. Exactly. And then identify on the flip side what doesn't light you up, what isn't important to you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it really is, it's important to remember that there are certain things in life that that are more important than counting calories and body fat for just a short period of time. Because let's face it, if you are working towards these goals throughout this whole year, you shouldn't really be worrying about some events over this period. You really shouldn't, because if you're putting, like, what is even a few weeks on 52 weeks of the year? What is that?
Absolutely. I think that's our overarching message as well, right? Like this is for a lot of people a time to be with friends and family. And if you're putting in the effort and the work 51 weeks of the year, and this is really 1 week of the year where you're a bit more relaxed, like there's not going to be a lot of damage that you can do after a few extra social engagements. Like, look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key, looking at the bigger picture as well. So I think really it comes down to maybe utilizing the time, a little bit of a balance between utilizing this time to also reflect on if you've started a new goal this year in fat loss or weight loss, and you've really decided you need to be more health conscious, then maybe reflect on some of the patterns or behaviors that you did have around this time last year, and think about a couple of the things that we've talked about that you could possibly implement, right? Because implementing those few things into the next month ahead does not at all mean that you're not going to go and enjoy this stuff with your family, be present in the moment, and that you should be guilty if you do go and indulge. You definitely shouldn't. It's just more about being mindful and also using it as a bit of an opportunity to maybe practice a few more conscious behaviors around time of the year.
That's the key, right? It's you're either choosing to engage in something, you really want to do it, or you're choosing not to.
Exactly.
And then you know, that's your decision, that's your choice.
Yeah. All in all, I mean, how do you feel, Gina? How do you feel? Are you excited? Like, are you about Christmas time, and do you kind of put any of those things into place for yourself, or what?
Yeah, I am excited. I mean, life is very, very crazy busy at the moment, so I haven't really made specific plans, but my family's going away. We're going to the beautiful Jervis Bay region, which is going to be stunning, and we've never actually left, like, or maybe a couple of times, we've never really gone to a holiday location with our intimate family for that period. So that is a bit exciting. That'll be beautiful. Have to find a great gym to do my pre and post Christmas lunch training. But yeah, very excited to be near the beach and that kind of thing. So now you've asked me and I'm thinking about it. I am excited, but prior to that, I've just been like doing all the things.
Straight away, you're already noticing that you're already thinking about training. Seems like it's a priority for you. Do you know what I mean? You want to get your training.
Yeah, yeah, training, beach, relaxing, like absolutely. Like those are things that are part of what I do.
Yeah.
But also the days that are days off, they're days off, right? Maybe going, like, my family doesn't spend much time together, but maybe going for a hike or finding a mountain would be enjoyable as well, like getting some fresh air. How about you? Are you excited about the period coming up?
I mean, like you just said, it's been honestly a crazy busy year, and we haven't even really stopped to think about what we're actually doing in the month ahead anyway. But I would say generally over this Christmas period, for me, it really is just a time to enjoy and relax a little, because obviously coming from my background and competing, dieting, I'm quite like goal orientated around my nutrition most of the year. So for me, it really is very more so of a time to actually just be present and enjoy, because I know that I'm going to be back on track in my normal routine in no time anyway. So there's no reason to feel anxious or worry about, oh, what if I come away 2-3 kilos heavier? Like, so what? It's just I'm going to go back on and do what I do after that anyway. So there's no real reason to be anxious.
That's probably a good thing to mention quickly. Now you've mentioned a couple of kilos. So also making sure listeners are aware that when you do, you know, consume a higher calorie intake over a day or so, or more carbohydrates, you're going to hold more water. So this, if you are the kind of person who weighs yourself regularly, there's going to be a bit of an influx or an increase in your weight. So what is it? I think glycogen stores 4 grams of water. For every gram of glycogen your body stores, it's 4 grams of water.
Yeah,
pretty sure that's right. So the more carbohydrate, the more fuller your glycogen stores are, the more water you're going to hold. So that's why you'll have those peaks on the scales, and it's not fat gain. It's going to come off again. It's just water.
And that's one thing to remember, even just on a weekly basis, really, is having that meal off, or having a higher sodium meal as well.
Sure.
Higher sodium, higher carbs. You don't gain that amount of body fat in one sitting. It's pretty much impossible unless you are literally eating for an entire day nonstop, making yourself sick. It would be incredibly hard to really gain very much fat at all, you know. So if you jump on the scales a couple days later after some events and you're a couple kilos heavier, I mean, that's normal. It'll come back down within a couple of days anyway. So definitely, there shouldn't be any stress around kind of the number on the scale, really, I feel.
Yeah.
Any time of the year, it's just a number and it does fluctuate. So
Absolutely. And so we wanted to wrap up the podcast moving forward with something for you guys to reflect on, or a question for you to ask yourself. So Alice had a couple of good ones.
Yeah, I basically just wanted to throw the questions out there. What goal you're going to set yourself in relation to your health and fitness for December, or I would say December moving into the first part of January. So, what goals are you going to set yourself in place to still focus on an element of your health and your fitness during this period? And the second question was, what mindful actions can you practice, or are you going to practice during this period as well? So maybe reflect back to some other periods in your life, maybe last Christmas, last festive season, where you came away and was like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I had done that better. Or maybe just take that time to reflect and see if there's any areas that you might be able to practice being more mindful with, I guess. Because at the end of the day, like, I think mindfulness is that overarching thing, right? You've got this all or nothing approach where it's just everything feels like it flies out the window, and then you've just got being mindful, and it's such a small thing, but it goes a long way, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the quote, don't sacrifice what you want most for what you want now, as well. So this is the thing. So this way of thinking, it can be something to keep in mind if you are very results driven or goal driven during this period. But then again, if you're more just on a maintenance phase, and this is the time to not necessarily be too focused on that either.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's different. Everyone's at a different stage of their journey. But yeah, and all in all, I think overarching message: enjoy it, be mindful. And just know that you can get back into the swing of life and all the hectic things that it throws at you as soon as the Christmas period is over anyway. So
exactly. And back your choices. Know what's your choice, and make decisions. It's in your power to decide what you want to decide and go with it.
Great. I think we can wrap it up there for today, but I hope this helps some of you and eases that little bit of anxiety that's coming through around the festive season, Christmas, and sticking with your health and fitness goals. And just remember, guys, to enjoy it and be present in the moment. And if you're enjoying our first two podcasts, also don't forget to share it with your friends so we can slowly build up our listening audience.
Yeah. We would love that. Yeah. And leave us a review. And if you do have any questions you'd like to send in, please don't hesitate to contact us and for future topics. All right. Thanks, Alice.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
The Body and Beyond podcast is for information purposes only. This podcast does not constitute advice or services, and the statements and views of the hosts and guests are not medical advice. The information provided should not be used for treatment or diagnosis purposes. Please discuss any information from this podcast with your healthcare professional before making any changes to your lifestyle.